This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it's time for Isms, the podcast that dares you to face life head on. In a world that doesn't always make sense and often moves in ways we struggle to accept, Ism challenges us to rise anyway. This is a space where we can confront life's realities with courage and truth while embracing our responsibility to live fully and authentically. Life is messy for all of us, unpredictable and hard, but buried beneath the chaos are opportunities waiting to be seen. When we shift our perspective and choose optimism over defeat, we don't just survive, we thrive. And that's where the real reward lives. My guest today, I met through podmatch.com. So thank you, podmatch.com. His name is Branch Isole. And I find it interesting that Branch is from the deep South. I'm from the northern Midwest. And yet when I read his bio, he believes in so much of what I believe, which tells me there is more of us that are alike than not alike. And sometimes we just have to listen a little bit. So, Branch, tell us who you are and where you have all this mental health information for us, because that's really what it is. It's using our brain.
That's for sure, Karen. Thanks for inviting me on. I've really been looking forward to our time together, and especially since we had that little chat before we went on the air. So maybe we can give that particular person some seeds for thought. Well, I grew up in the 50s and 60s, so I'm a child of post-World War II and the 60s revolutions. I did all the things I thought I was supposed to do and was encouraged to do, and went to high school, went to college, got out of college, went into the corporate world, and was very successful. Had lots of money and lots of toys, and completely destroyed my life. And I embraced the ways of the world and discovered that I really hated who I was. And so, having lost all my material wealth that I had accumulated in those 15 years, I knew I had to change my life. And so I decided that I would seek out truth, whatever that looked like, and whatever the cost was. And when you seek out the truth and you find it, it costs you dearly sometimes in relationships. But that's another podcast episode. So I went on a 5-year sabbatical searching for truth, and that led me into different religions and belief systems and mysticism and New Age and all the philosophies and ways of life that one can explore. And after that journey and all of that study and walking, I discovered that the truth was found in the core element of every spiritual belief system and religion. And that core for every one of those is love God first and most, treat others the way you want to be treated. And from that core value comes, everything that we believe and don't believe, and everything that religions and philosophy and spirituality teaches us. So that got me to the point where, okay, now I understand what I'm supposed to do. What happens next? And so I spent the next 10 years struggling, like most of us do when we decide, okay, this is the path I want to go on. And, the struggle, like all of us, when we're struggling, the struggle is designed to beat us down, right? To keep us enslaved and to keep us thinking that, this is all there is and I can't change it. And sort of that victim mentality. And yet we know inside that we're not victims, that we can be conquerors. And we know that because we've seen it throughout our lives and we see it throughout history, right? There are people who do overcome the things that hold them back. And what I discovered was we all experience 12 lessons in life from first breath to last breath. And the first lesson is insecurity. You know, we all come into this world as newborn, malleable babes. And about age 2, we understand what the word no means, and we associate that with punishment. And then we discover the world's ways are all about reward and punishment. And so we start our young life going through every experience and family dynamics and neighborhood dynamics with this idea of, well, what's in this for me in this choice of decision, a reward or punishment? And then that's only reinforced by every society's legal system, right? And so that's what we know, that's what we embrace, and that's the sort of mental path that we start down. And as children, we quickly come to find out that there's other kids in our neighborhood and families and things that are different than us. And some of them are smarter than us, and some of them are taller than us, and some of them have, more hair or more beauty than us. And so we automatically understand that we have some insecurities, right? We're not as we want to be. And so that's where every one of us starts, with battling with these cognition of I'm not what I want to be, right? Ken and Barbie and whatever it is, right? That's what we grew up. And so we focus on our insecurities. And as long as we are in that place, and as long as we drag that emotional baggage with us, that, I'm not smart enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm too bald, I'm too thin, I'm whatever it is, right? What we drag with us in comparing ourselves to others, that's the power that holds us back.
Yeah.
And once we're able to understand, I'm not going to get any taller than I am, and I'm going bald and I'm going bald, right? Once we accept our insecurities and we put those things aside, then we can take on the lessons of life. But in the meantime, until we put those insecurities aside, every day in every situation, every relationship, every circumstance, right? Life is throwing us these curveballs and fastballs. And if we're hanging on to our insecurities, then we're unable to respond to those lessons in life. And let me go through the 12 lessons real quickly so people will know what we're talking about, right? So we put aside our insecurities. And the first one and the most important one is personal responsibility. When we take on personal responsibility, it allows us to be responsible for our thoughts and words and actions. And once we're willing to do that, it gives us the power and the strength to put down excuses, right? If we are willing to take responsibility for our thoughts and our words and our actions, then we don't need to make up excuses why I didn't do something or why I wanted to do something, but I didn't do something. And once we get rid of the excuses, we no longer have deal with lies, right? Get rid of the excuses, it eliminates the lies. So once we become personally responsible for what we say and do, we have a new freedom. And what it does, that personal responsibility is our launching pad to handle the other 10 lessons that life is going to throw at us every day. And those are dependability, reliability, accountability, and credibility. Now, this group are the ones that we deal with every day in our daily life, especially in our work life, right?
Right.
And as we become more successful at each of those, because we take personal responsibility, then I become more dependable and more reliable and more accountable and more credible. So I'm able to handle my work life, but also my personal relationship life, but especially my work life, because in our 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s, that's where our focus is how do we provide for ourselves and our family? And that has to do with our employment and our business energy. So once you can handle those, you're going to be successful in the work world. It's that simple. The more responsible you are, the more you take on those responsibilities for being dependable, reliable, accountable, credible. The next one, the middle one, is risk. And then the second set are commitment, trust, forgiveness, truth, and love. Now, you notice this group is more esoteric. It's more, it's not as concrete, right?
Mm.
And so the bottom group is where men focus their energies. And then, at some point I have to, okay, how am I going to handle my family and my neighborhood and my community responsibilities? In that case, you have to risk stepping outside your comfort zone that you've worked so hard to establish and work on commitment and trust and forgiveness and truth and love. Now, those, by very nature, are automatically more feminine. Uh, Females, that's who they are. That's what they're built for, are these important ones that are outside the things of this world. And so here's the struggle, right? And now we're in an age where women are in the workforce big time, and they come into the workforce with this natural commitment, trust, forgiveness, truth, and love. They have to learn all of those other ones, right? The responsibility, the
Right.
dependability, so this is the struggle in life for us as male and female. This is the hunter-gatherer model, right? You're either born into the hunter group or you're born into the gather group, and you're trying to establish a balance between both so that you can handle the ones that life throws you about commitment and trust and forgiveness, just like you do reliability, accountability, and dependability. And these same 12 lessons, everyone who's ever lived has faced these lessons their entire life from birth to death. And that's what life is all about, testing us in these lessons of life to see how we respond. And the challenge for us is to be willing to risk crossing that bridge and taking on the ones that are not most comfortable for us in the beginning. And the more we can do that, the more balanced our life becomes. And the more balanced our life becomes, the more balanced our relationships become. And then the more successful we are at home and at work. And so this is that struggle that life presents to us, and we never get out of it. I mean, that's the gig, that's the game, right? Uh, how do I come from the truth in my life, meaning how do I respond morally and ethically to the choices and the dilemmas and the situations that I face, and how do I do it coming from my highest loving self? And that's the challenge of life that we all face all the way through life. And the key, the struggle is to try and balance out so that no matter what life throws at us, right? We don't go crazy. We don't set our hair on fire, our pants on fire. We know if I respond truthfully and loving and I respond with personal responsibility, there's nothing that life can throw at me that I can't conquer. And of course, the more successful we are in each of those, the more strength we develop and have to take on whatever the next one is. And of course, life being life, as soon as you go, yeah, I got that one, right? And you go, I'm going to take a day off. Well, that's life says, okay, good job. And let's see how you do with this one, right? And the next person who comes into your life throws you another curveball. And how are you going to handle that one? And the key to handling every one of them is simple. You respond morally and ethically. You'll see when you respond morally and ethically, it's no longer about what's in it for me, a reward or punishment. What's in it for me now is what's in it for us? What's in it for me and my family, me and my neighborhood, me and my community, me and my world, right? And what's in it for me and in my best interest is to respond morally and ethically. And what are morally and ethical responses look like? Well, we already know. Love God first and most. Treat others the way you want to be treated. And that's how simple the key, the secret to living a successful life, both at home and outside of the home. It's all about relationships. And if you are willing to look at yourself and look at truth in your life, the minute you understand truth, you automatically see all of the untruths, the excuses, the fabrications, the falsehoods, and the lies. And that's where the challenge comes. Now that I know truth and I know what it looks like in my life by responding morally and ethically, the next curveball that life throws at me, I have to decide, how am I going to respond? Am I going to respond truthfully and lovingly and responsibly, or am I going to respond the way I used to respond before I understood these things? The way I've been responding and struggling in my life, my whole life up to this point, because life doesn't want you to know about the truth. The world we live in is diametrically opposed to truth and love. And
As I'm
because
listening,
that's what we grew up, embracing and knowing, that's what we embrace and know.
as I listen to this, it's like, this is so simple. Why aren't we taught this out of the womb? Because I'm going back to something you said in the beginning, when we're little kids, when we're babies, okay, we develop doing things to get reactions. Okay. We may not do it consciously in the beginning, but we cry. And when somebody picks us up and soothes us, isn't that nice? You put me back down, I'm going to cry again because I liked what you just did. And I have gone through this process myself, thinking I learned to be selfish as a young child, not on purpose. My parents did not want to bring me up to be a selfish kid, but I was a crier until I probably was about 14 years old, because it would get my parents' attention. I have two older brothers, one who's very artsy and one who has this uncontrollable sense of humor. And I saw myself as, I'm a nothing compared to the two of them. But if I cried, even if it meant being sent to my room, I got the attention. And I did some of that, as I now call, ridiculous behavior outside of the home amongst friends. It took me till I was almost in my 50s to say, I don't like what I've been doing. And yet, everything I was reading at the time was telling me, you're too old to change. It's never going to happen. But I chose to say, it's going to happen. And that means I have to keep taking steps forward. And yes, have I been knocked down along the way? Absolutely. But I knew where I wanted to be. And I'm finding that so many of us believe we can't change. The old saying, can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, let me tell you, I've learned a lot of new tricks in the last 25 years. What drove you to find this philosophy? What was the breaking point for you?
Wow, what a great question. Well, people always ask me, and I feel like I've led two lives, right? The first 40 years of my life, I led like we all do, embracing the ways of the world and whatever that was for me in my situations. And I knew I had lost everything that I claimed was important to me. and I destroyed the most important things in my life out of selfishness, right? All about me. How do I get to be number one, the best, whatever it was I was doing? And I knew that I didn't like who I had become, right? I knew I had to change. And what we were just saying is so important. There's no growth without change. I write a lot about the no growth zone that people get into, like you were just describing, right? We all do it. We all get there and we get comfortable, and then we often get comfortably numb, and then we get comfortably miserable, right? And every one of those stages affects not only who we are, but our relationships. And that's why we have so many struggles in our personal relationships at home, right? We're not willing to compromise. We're not willing to look that to change, to grow from what I am now. I have to change. I can't stay in this place or on this path and expect it to be any different if there's no change, right? And so that was my breaking point. I knew I had to change because I hated who I was. I hated what I had done to the people I claimed I cared about. And I knew that that change was grounded in finding truth because I could see all of the abuse and the misuse, in my life, in my world. And I was just sick and tired of it. I didn't want to, I could no longer go down that path. I had to change who I was. And to change who I was meant that I had to confront who I had been and not go down. I had to go down a new path, right? And I grew up in what I call a CE and O Christian household: Christmas, Easter, and occasionally.
Okay.
So I knew nothing about religion. I knew the Holy Trinity, the names, and that was about it. It wasn't something that I was drawn to, although I knew inside there was more. But I didn't grow up in a religious household. We were not practicing Christians. We went occasionally. And so it wasn't part of who I was, but I knew that truth was the essence that was missing in my life. And so that's where my journey led to truth. And as I said, that led me to this understanding of what every religion and every philosophy and every spiritual system is built on. Love God first and most, but more importantly, once you've gotten that, treat others the way you want to be treated. Christ says, on these two are all the laws and the prophets, meaning every law ever written by man and every prophet ever spoke was about these two elements of life. And so once I discovered that, then I had to put it into practice. And that's where, of course, the rubber meets the road. Okay, now you know it. Now you get it. Can you do it? And when you do it, you step on a lot of toes because we are all where you just described, right? In a place that innately we know there's something missing or there's something out of whack here, but we don't know. Nobody ever tells us, what the steps are, right? What's my next step now that I get this? It's like going to counseling, marriage counseling or couples counseling, and the counselor says, well, what's going on? And you say, and they say, what? And you say, well, we don't know how to communicate, right? And so we spend all this time learning how to communicate. Well, we grow up, every one of us, watching and hearing and embracing what we see in our home and what we see, in school and things. And that's nothing against our parents. They grew up the same way. They grew up what they saw and heard is what they did and said, right? And that's what we saw. And it's generational. And that's why it's so difficult to break the mold, because life grabs us and doesn't allow us to come up for air to understand that it can be different. And then, okay, what does that look like, right? Most of us are just in that daily grind, in that daily struggle of how do I get to Friday? Or how do I get, through this day? Or how do I get through this meeting? And that's not what it's about. What it's about is breaking that generational pattern of not changing, of just repeating what I saw, what I heard. This is how parents act and behave, you know, and what we teach our children is how they become adults, right? And that's why all of us in this world struggle so much as adults, because we carry our insecurities with us and we carry our childhood trauma and drama with us. And every system, every family is dysfunctional. Nobody gets out alive. And that's the issue. The dysfunction that you grew up with and unless you are willing to stop and change it, it will continue.
You know,
And,
it's
you know,
interesting because I grew up with two parents who they saw our roles as their kids in their head, how we should all turn out. Um, but and they sort of said it, but they never like made this big announcement that, you know, you're going to be a doctor and you're going to be a lawyer and you're going to get married and have 10 kids. Okay. It was just things were assumed. But what I did see my parents do is constantly evolve themselves into new projects, new things. And I didn't realize it as a very young child. But when I was in my 40s, my parents, my mother was a baker. My father had a knack of selling. And he came up to my mother one day and said, "We're going to start a muffin business. And I'm going to deliver muffins to the offices around here." Well, they were both in their glory. She loved to bake. He got to go out and meet people. And my brothers and I sat back and we said, "You're in your 80s. Why?" And my father's answer was, "Why not?" And that's when it dawned on me, all the things I'd seen them do, they never gave up. My father was not a wealthy man in money, but he had friends, he had acquaintances, he had family, and he loved life. And I think that's what hit me when I turned 50. It was like, there's all these things that I've wanted to do in my life. I haven't done them. What is holding me back? And that's when I realized, hey, if I don't start doing it now, I'm going to be on my deathbed saying, I should have.
now what you just described is what burns in the soul of every entrepreneur, right? That's the key to entrepreneur success is risking stepping out of what has been comfortable to pursue that dream,
Yep.
that vision that you have, that I can do more than this, right? I can be more than this. And if I am more and I can be more, then why not be more? But you have to risk stepping off of that particular path of security, whatever that looks like in your life, and risk, the challenge of unsecurity and real work. No entrepreneur has 8 to 5 jobs, right?
Yeah.
And if you own your own business, it's as much as it can be every week, right? But if you love it and you have a passion and a acuity for it, once you start to see success in it, then you start to learn. Okay, and you learn from your mistakes, right? None of us goes from 0 to 100 without stumbling and falling. But you understand that those are growth producing, those are illuminating elements or situations that allow you to see how to do it a better way or a more intuitive way or a less expensive way. Every challenge presents an opportunity. If you listen to all the big speakers, they say this over and over again. It's a challenge, but behind that cloud is a silver lining. Look at Warren Buffett. He always said behind every mistake or failure or error is an opportunity. And that's what you have to see is the positive part. The door is open, right? The door gets slammed in your face, but the door will open again. So when it does open, now you have a new fresh look at what, like Edison said, I know 999 ways that a light bulb won't work, right? So you work on the things that are successful for you. Nothing breeds success like success. And you do this by not repeating the missteps and the failures. You don't go back there. And that's the difference between successful people and people who never get out of their comfort zone, right? People who are struggling because they repeat the same inappropriate choices. They've already been down that road. They've already got the negative consequence. So why go back there? Well, they don't know what else to do. Well, this is the difference between those who can and those who can't. The ones who don't go back to that place find a different option. And that option may not work either, but every no gets you closer to a yes. Anybody in sales already knows that. It's a numbers game, right?
Right.
You've got to try, but the ones that work for you when you're successful, you repeat those. The easiest way to make money in a business is by repeat and referral business, because you don't have to pay for all of the upfront establishing a new account. So you do what succeeds for you over and over and over again. And every success will open a new door or a new window for you to enhance what you're doing or take what you're doing to the next level. Steve Jobs, perfect example. From one little idea came all of these products, and every one of them was better than the last. And so you gotta get off the couch and do it. You've got to have faith. If other people have done it and can do it, so can you. But you've got to see what they did. Look, there's two ways to make money. Do what other people won't do what other people can't do. Those are two ways to guarantee success. And once you're successful, you repeat that success again and again and again. McDonald's started with one franchise, and 3 items on their menu, and look at them now. But you're gonna have challenges. You're gonna have holes of adversity. The idea is not to get a bigger shovel and keep digging. The idea is to climb out of the hole and don't go back in that one. It's easier to step around a hole than it is to dig yourself out. You already know this. You've lived your life for however many years you've been alive. If you're listening to this, you already know the negative stuff. Your choice is to not go back there, to do something new and different. The worst, they're not going to take you out and shoot you. So the worst that can happen is you stumble and fall. Okay. Everyone in this world who's ever been successful, was an overnight success after 25 years. I mean, that's what it's about. You get in there and you get people around you who can help you grow. You build a team by having people who have different skill sets. Just look at any company that's successful. Not everybody gets along, but most of the ones who are hitting it on all cylinders, they can work as a team. And that's what good leadership and good management is about. But you've got to let go of the insecurities. You got to let go of all the stuff you already know is negative and not go back there. And if you don't go back there, look how much time, energy you've got to find something new that you do love. And once you've got a passion for it with the right, connections, and you've got connections in your neighborhood and in your community, all you have to do is get involved in any kind of community activity, and you're going to meet lots of people. Well, and if you've got something to offer, they're going to help you get it out there.
My question is, we're taught what is wrong, but we aren't typically guided to look at what was wrong so we don't repeat it. And as you were talking, I was thinking of kids who are in school and getting their spelling test wrong. week after week after week. And what happens? The teacher slaps her hand, sends a note home to mom and dad. Mom and dad get mad, tell them to study more. Maybe it's not that they have to study more. Maybe there is a reason they're not catching on, or they're making the same mistake over and over again. I remember, I think I was in second grade. There was a little girl who sat next to me who had trouble reading. And so her parents went out and bought her the book that we were reading in class. So she would carry it back and forth, and she would read it over and over and over again. So by the time she got to class, she could read very fluently. So I went to my parents. I said, "Oh, I'm having trouble reading. I need my own book." But I didn't pick up what she was doing. And actually, I learned it many years later when we were like in fifth or sixth grade, when I said, "How did that book work for you? It didn't work for me." And she said, "Because all I did was read the book over and over and over again." She learned what she had to do not to make the same mistakes. I didn't know what it was about. I could read, but I chose to tell my parents I couldn't. So then I pretended like I was struggling. We need people around us to help understand what we're going through, the mistakes that we're making. My father used to tell me, "Leave the writing to your brothers and I. You're not a writer." And I will tell you that stung for many years. At my father's funeral, I wrote and delivered his eulogy. And my brother said to me, "Where did you learn to write?" And I learned how to write the night before the funeral because he wasn't going to tell me it wasn't any good.
Yeah. There's nothing we can't, Napoleon Hill said, what the mind can conceive, we can achieve. And it's a mindset. Everything is a mindset, right? And you either have, and when does this come? I don't know. It comes differently. We all are given a talent or a skill or a purpose, right? And that's the key. We have to discover what that is and then share that with the world. And you start by sharing it at the eulogy with the few people who are there, right? And then you grow from there. It's all about, life is about relationships and growth. You are not, John Donne said, right? No man is an island. We can't survive alone. So we have to interact with people. So you have to become a good person, a better husband, a better mother. How do you do that? Well, you start to live truthfully. You start to see things for what they truly are. And once you embrace truth, you automatically understand what love is about. And when you come from your highest loving self, when your child, does something that's inappropriate, in our day in the 50s, you got a slap in the face or a slap on the butt, right? And that's what discipline was. Okay, well, there's a time for discipline, but not every time you drop an ice cream cone. You When you live truthfully and become a loving person, then you see the mistake as a mistake. And it's just a child, right? We forget that we were children, and you just have to come from a different place in your life. You have to see the world through truthful and loving eyes. And once you're willing to do that, that's what you will see. And then you see when somebody cuts you off in traffic, or is a jerk. And okay, I've cut somebody off in traffic before too. So get over it. Let them get in front of you. What's the hurry? Man, we live in a crazy world. I'm a big YouTube watcher, and I love these take the people who this week's fails, right? And you wonder why people do such crazy, stupid things. Well, They do. That's what they do, right? My choice is not to try and go down that rail on a skateboard for 100 feet. Okay, but if you want to do it, go for it. The consequence of your choice will play out in your life. The idea is to limit or eliminate the negative consequences in your life. Truthful and loving people see the difference, right? And when my child does something that's inappropriate, instead of hitting them, I sit them down and say, you know, why did you do that? What's the consequence? Is there a different way to do it? And they make mistakes, but the idea is to quit making the negative ones, right?
Right.
And the way you do that is you become a more loving person. Then you see what's really important and what you can correct and what you maybe not correct, but you can't correct everything. But as a parent, you can give your children a foundation of love, and that's what will help them grow and eliminate those insecurities that they have, partly because of you're the parent, they learn from you. But so when you become a more truthful and loving person, they will become more truthful and loving. That's the way it works, right? Children learn what they see, what they hear, and then that's what they do. Well, if you're truthful and loving, then they will be also, and they will be better adults quicker, and they'll realize, hey, I've been putting this cable in for 2 years. Well, I can do something different. Now I know how to do the cable thing. I'll start a little cable company of my own. It's a matter of understanding you can do it. Now you have to learn what those steps are. And it's just like the 12 lessons of life steps. Well, in the same way, in our relationships, every relationship that has problems is repairable, right? But how? What do I do? Right? You go through that, you have this issue you're with your teenager or your spouse or your partner or whatever, and somebody said something that was hurtful and inappropriate, and say, gee, I'm sorry, I hurt your feelings, or I didn't mean to do that. And they say, well, okay, I don't really believe you because you're not sincere. You go through all that militia. And the reason is you finally say, well, can't we just move on? And the problem is neither one knows what the next step to moving on looks
Right.
like, which goes back to what you just said a few minutes ago. If you don't know, then how do you respond, right? And so just like there's 12 lessons in life, there's 7 steps of a relationship repair. And if you'll do these 7 steps, not only can you repair a relationship, or at least get it on track for repair without going to counseling, without going to therapy, but should you decide to get professional help, you'll have already done the foundation things so that you don't spend 20 questions with the therapist, right? Trying to get to, okay, well, what is the problem? You've already gotten to the problem. You've already started down the road to repair. So let me give your audience
Okay.
these 7 steps, okay? First, you recognize that something has been said or done that was inappropriate, that harm has been done. Second step, the transgressor, the one who did it, has to take responsibility for their actions or their words, right? Okay, once they've taken responsibility, the next step is regret. I have to understand that I caused harm to you. The next step is remorse. Now, a lot of people get these two mixed up, but regret is what I did to you. Remorse is self-inflicted, right? Why did I do that? The regret is for having done it. The remorse is, like I said before, I couldn't go on anymore. I had to change my direction. The next step is redress or correction. We have to come up with a way to make it right. The 6th step is repetition. I have to understand that that behavior is no longer repeatable in the future. This is the last time it ever happens. And the seventh and final step is repentance. Now, people often think, oh, repentance is about religion. Well, it's not. Repentance is about changed future behavior, meaning it's not going to be repeated again. And to ensure that it's never going to happen again in that form or fashion, right? Changed future behavior. That's what makes the repetition viable. Once you get to the seventh step, to the repentance, it's not going to happen in the future again, then forgiveness can come into the picture. You see, whenever we've harmed someone in our family or at work, coworker, whatever it may be, there's three levels of harm that have taken place that have to be recognized before we even ever start the seven steps. And those three levels are the manifestation, the actual act, what happened, what was said. The second one is betrayal. See, the manifestation is what we get mad about. But the second level, the deeper level, is the betrayal. That's the one where it really cuts like a knife. That's where the harm is really done on an emotional level. And the third is the breach of trust. And that's the core of the problem, right? You've broken a trust between us that we had put value and hope and our future in. And once the trust is broken, there will be little or no repair viable unless you go through the seven steps. So once we understand what I did was wrong, and I really have harmed you emotionally, and I've broken or put a wedge in the trust that was there, how do we correct it? Here's where, okay, what's the next step, right? Well, the next step is the seven steps. And if we understand what we've done and we go through the repair steps to make it happen, at least when we get to step 7, we have a chance of repair and reconciliation. Now, doesn't always happen, but at least you've given it a viable opportunity to be successful in a process that will work.
I love it. How can my listeners follow you and learn more and maybe get personal advice?
Oh, thanks for asking. Sure. Well, I've got a website, obviously, branchisole.com. I've got a YouTube channel, Ranch Isole. I also have a podcast. It's called Patient Zero. It's live on Substack every Wednesday night. And then immediately thereafter, it's available on Apple and Spotify and, all the podcast networks and my website and stuff. The easiest way, just Google my name, Branch, like a tree, Isole. I'm the only one, so it comes up first page, and there you'll find all kinds of links and, to the things that I write about. I've got books and ebooks, and, I've got a YouTube channel that's got 500 posts on it, lots of short stories and poems, and all of my written work deals with life issues and the struggles that we go through. And the design is so that every reader will eventually come to a story that they can identify, with the protagonist or the antagonist or the theme or the situation. And most of the stories sort of have a twist or turn at the end so that the reader or the watcher comes out going, wow, I hadn't thought about it that way. Or, wow, I hadn't thought about it that way, right? It really applies to me. And so that's the whole idea. But behind my written work is it's called Looking Out and Seeing In is the tagline. So we're looking out at situations, in my life, in my family life, in all the lives of people I'm involved with, and all of those kinds of love, hate, revenge, poor, wealthy, whatever the situation may be, there's something for the reader to identify with and then realize, gee, I'm not the only one who's ever faced this, number one, and there is a way out, number two. And I hadn't thought about this as the way out, number 3. So that's what all the writing is about. But I appreciate you asking.
Well, thank you, Branch. It's been an enjoyable time with you. And I hope everybody will check out the show notes because everything will be in there for you. So there's no excuse to say, wait a second, how do I find Branch? Guess what? There will be a link. Thank you again for joining me and have a
Thank you, Karen.
wonderful day.
I appreciate your time and thanks for asking me to be on. If I can help you in the future, just let me know.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.